And welcome back to the Legal, and today we're just going to have an overview of Denmark's stringent asylum regulations, and we're going to see what does the Danish jewellery law stipulate. Well, items valued over 10,000 Denmark krones may be confiscated. That's valued around €1,340, or in sterling that's £1,177 sterling. And upon arrival in Denmark, authorities may confiscate any cash valuables exceeding 10,000 Denmark krones from an asylum seeker. The aim of this is to fund the costs associated with housing, food and care throughout the asylum process, so they fund their own asylum accommodation. Some personal belongings are not subject to restrictions, and the Danish police are unable to confiscate such things as wedding rings, engagement bands, objects that hold significant sentimental value, and essential personal items like cheap mobile phones, cheap watches that they deem is cheap, and standard value clothing. Now, authorities assess sentimental value on a case-by-case basis. Confiscation may encompass jewellery, gold and other high-valued items. Items that may include that they can take is non-sentimental gold jewellery, premium wristwatches, suppose Apple watches and such, high-end electronic devices like Apple or anything that value high electronic end devices, drones and such, and a cash amount that surpasses the limit, and asylum seekers are required to declare their valuables. Law enforcement has the authority to request asylum seekers to disclose their valuables, examine baggage, list and confiscate any items exceeding the threshold. Now, you can return stored items if asylum is approved, and if an individual obtains protection status and starts to support themselves, any seized items may be returned provided they've already been utilised to cover the expenses. So expenses for IPAS centres and such. And the object of the law requires that asylum seekers who have the means contribute to their maintenance, much like Danish citizens. So why should the Danish citizens have to just contribute to themselves to their accommodation and not asylum seekers? They're expected to minimise their personal assets before assessing specific social benefits. Now, the default status is temporary. Nearly all refugees obtain short-term resident permits that require regular renewal. Long-term settlement is not taken into account, and I think it's nearly 8 years for long-term settlement into Denmark. A single permit revocation. Now, a refugee with temporary status may lose their permit if they travel back to their home country or if authorities determine that conditions have improved. Now, of course, if you travel back to your home country, well, then you're not suffering persecution and fleeing from a place that you're travelling back to, I think. So it does necessitate several years of residency and full-time employment, passing Danish language exams, so you must speak Danish to enter the country. Much like English, you should speak English to enter the country, maintain a clean criminal record and demonstrate active citizenship. Danish law permits the transfer of asylum seekers also to third countries outside Europe, so they don't have to hold them in IPAS centres for their cases to be processed there. Denmark applies the safe third country rule, rejecting cases where individuals have travelled through a country deemed safe regardless of the validity of the claims. And limited family reunification rights. Individuals with temporary protection frequently encounter lengthy delays and stringent criteria, as the law should be strict, before they can bring their family members over, and that to see there's no abuse of Article 8 right to family life under the European Charter. Now, tighter behaviour and cooperation guidelines, a lack of collaboration, minor infractions or inadequate compliance may hinder renewals or result in removal from the country. Now, emphasise return instead of integration. Policies prioritise repatriating individuals as soon as feasible rather than facilitating long-term settlement. Denmark implements strict borders also and security measures, active discouraging spontaneous arrivals while maintaining tight control over entry and asylum processing, which is a necessity for any functioning democracy. And now, in your opinion, do you agree that this method of enforcement should be adopted universally across countries all over, or do you feel that they are too harsh? Leave your comments below. And of course, I think that stricter, tighter border controls are needed. And I think that, of course, if a person has assets, like in the home country here, if a person applies to the Department of Social Protection, well, then their assets are taken into account. If they're on a HAP scheme, I suppose, maybe for rent allowance, I suppose their assets are taken into account. So why are asylum seekers' assets not also taken into account? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. It should be a part of control, border control. And look, asylum policies do need to get tighter, as you know. But will this happen? Well, it remains to be seen. But anyway, as I said, leave your comments in the comments section below.